Well, now, that was a pain in the ass. Right. I'm kind of assuming that my friend Ellis Paul is having no troubles over at StreamYard. So, Restream, if you're listening, I'm probably leaving. And, this has not been consistent. It's become problematic, and I don't like that. So, there we go. Where the hell was I? I don't remember where the hell I was. But basically talking about wrapping up 1990. What wound up happening from that point on was after the there was an incident. There was something I was going to talk about earlier in 1990. On one of these particular runs, we did a radio conference called the Upper Midwest Music Conclave, and I met a guy named Ron Sorensen, who was the music director at what was then called KBLE. It was a station in Des Moines, Iowa, that was a cable station. It was, which is why it was called KBLE. What am I saying? Well, when we had our shows all canceled, that little stretch when we ended up for a week in, literally a week in Romulus, Michigan, instead of flying home, I did the math. It was going to cost us more money to fly home than to just stay out and just park in a hotel. It was going to be about $150 a day, and it was going to be about $300 to $500 a person to fly home and fly back. So I did all the math, and we parked. It was a drag. Then Regis Philbin died. That sucks. I ended up having a long conversation with Ron to see, when these things got canceled, to see if there was something we could do. And although he didn't really have anything for us to do, it forged a friendship that exists to this day. I last spoke to Ron in March, when I was, or it might have been February, when I was out in, I think it was early February, when I was out in Iowa touring, and we didn't see each other, but we got to have a nice long chat. And I usually see him every time I go there, and usually play on the air on the station that succeeded KBLE, KFMG in Des Moines, Iowa. So, yes, we get to the end, and at the end of the tour, after playing this triumphant show with John Hyatt at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., Sean Colvin on the bill. Sean came and sang a Christmas song with us. John asked Sean and Eric and I to go on stage with him and sing a song called Heaven Help Us All. That was a Stevie Wonder tune that he was closing the show with. And the next day, we stuck around for one extra day and to have a big dinner. I think it was over at Middleton's in Annapolis. And I decided to go home. I decided to go to the phone booth, use my little MCI card, and check my answering machine. This was pre-voicemail. It was answering machine. I literally had to hold up a little beeper and go boop so that it would play me back my messages. And there was a message from the record company, from Andy Francis at the record company, saying, "Hey, hope your tour went great. I just figured I would say, will all the artists here who are on functioning active label step forward?" Not so fast. Chameleon Records, as you know it, is gone. It's closing down. Let's talk. And he wanted to manage us. But essentially, the yikes. That's all I had to say was yikes. Our biggest and best show ever at the end of our first year, when we really clawed some territory out of the brush and made some progress, and the record company was closing. Now, we thought we might get picked up by them in there. They were basically changing incarnations and moving from Capitol distribution to Elektra Records. And we were the second or third best-selling artist on the roster at the time, out of about 12 artists. Walking on a Wire had done pretty close to 50,000 units. And we were a cheap date. We didn't cost them a lot, so it should have worked out. And early January of 1991, now, by the way, early January of 91, we went and played Minneapolis and did a sold-out show, 600 seats, at the Guthrie Theater, which is a preeminent, I like that word, preeminent, a big, legitimate theater. Spider John Kerner at the bottom of the bill. Middle of the bill, opening for us, Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark. Now, that is one of the craziest moments of my life, that Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt would be opening for us, but that's what was happening. And it's pretty crazy, definitely pretty crazy. So I got to meet them. Townes was sweet. Guy was cranky. It kind of hurt my feelings, but what the hell. Anyway, but we, later in that month, we did a show at the Breakaway, essentially an audition for the head of our label, for the owner of our label, who was not the head of the label. Stephen Powers was the president of the label, but Dan Pritzker, who's the son of the governor of Illinois. The Pritzker family owned the Hyatt hotel chain, extremely wealthy Chicago-based family. And Dan had bought the label partly to take ownership of the VJ Records catalog and partly because he wanted to push his own band called Sonia Dada, who were fantastic. So their first records came out. They didn't come out until after they had made the move to Elektra, but they essentially kept Dramarama. They may have kept Mary's Danish. I think they ended up letting Mary's Danish go. They let us go. They signed Lucinda Williams to her first record, the one with Passionate Kisses on it, which she had written for Mary Chapin Carpenter. And now, as they say, was that. That was that. We were hoping that we would find a deal very quickly. One of the things we wound up doing was we had heard about this thing called South by Southwest, and we had not bothered to apply for South by Southwest. We didn't really think we had any need for it, but we figured we need to get out there. We need to get a deal. We need to get another record out. We had enough songs. So I got on the phone. I heard about, I basically called and said, my name's Dan Navarro. I'm from Lowe and Navarro. We didn't bother to apply for a showcase. We've just lost our deal. Been touring steadily for the last half a year. Can I talk to the guy who books? And they said, hold on. And the guy comes on the phone and goes, hello, this is Louis. And it was Louis J. Myers, who was one of the founders and the guy who dealt with all the bands. Later, from 2005 to 2015, 14, something like that, had been the executive director of Folk Alliance. And we worked together very, very, very closely in those years. But at this point in time, I didn't know him. I told him the story, and he goes, we'll find you something. And he booked Lowe and Navarro. Like, yikes. And we got a gig, but we did not get a deal. We thought we would be getting a deal within 6 months because we'd had such a good run, and that didn't happen. We were close at a couple of places, but it didn't happen. And it eventually wasn't until 1993, 3 full years later, that we ended up releasing Broken Moon for Mercury. Our friend Tom Vickers, who had placed my song, The Test of Love, with Billy Burnett. With Dave Edmonds. I co-wrote it with Billy Burnett, and Billy had been a solo singer-songwriter and also had become a member of Fleetwood Mac. He was in Mick Fleetwood's side project, Mick Fleetwood Zoo, and there was a point when Lindsey Buckingham left the band, and so Billy joined Fleetwood Mac for a while. Later, he had a duo with Becca Bramlett, the daughter of Bonnie Bramlett, and it was called Billy and Becca. And he's now a pretty busy songwriter in Nashville. I last saw him about 7 or 8 years ago in Nashville. It was a rather liquid evening, as I recall, but as I vaguely recall. But we just basically spent 1991, 1992 touring our asses off, continuing to go back and back and back. In 1991, we played the Feline Center at Wolf Trap, opening for Sean Colvin and Richard Thompson. A pretty amazing show. And there were lots of things like that in 1991 where we would find ourselves in some good situations, just basically playing off the fumes of 1990. By this time, we were selling out the Birchmere and Max's on Broadway pretty routinely, selling out the Fine Line pretty routinely, selling out Cabaret Metro in Chicago pretty routinely, the Boulder Theater or the Fox Theater in Boulder, and of course adding other areas to what we did. We were doing Seattle, we were doing Phoenix, we were, going out and trying to just pound it into the ground and see what we could do and work it as hard as we could. That was our job. And it was a very, very, very busy time as we wound up, just, as I said, carrying on. In 1991 or 92, we also started playing Nashville and developed a good relationship with WRLT, Lightning 100 Radio, at the time run by a guy named John Conlon. Played some really great shows at a place called Diamond in the Rough on Main Street, which is on Broadway, which is then it's changed. I think it's a place called Wolfie's now, if it's even still in business. There were fun times. Eric and I realized, we really should be spending some time in Nashville. And in early 1992, we started going to Nashville, spending weeks at a time, 3 and 4 weeks, writing with local people, getting the lay of the land. We would do our little shows over at Diamond in the Rough. The people who loved us there were very, very good to us, and just basically kept going. We would add other shows in other places that didn't necessarily take. We played Eddie's Attic in Decatur, Georgia. We played a place called, I want to say the Avon, or maybe it was Avondale, Georgia, and I can't remember the name of the venue. Really, one of the memorable things for me out of that was that Eric and I were playing Tomorrow's a Long Time, or maybe Goldmine, and he just played something where he just got the chord completely wrong, and it was one of those moments that was very, very, very clearly a mistake. And I just looked up and went, "Jazz!" And the audience roared. But we were out there just trying to keep it going. And at this point in time, it was still Richard and Tad and Butch and Eric and me. The Chameleon van went away, so we started renting vans. And then we started a series of dates, oh God, do I remember this, where we would rent a Lincoln Town Car and a Toyota truck with a 10-foot box on the back. The Toyota truck we would rent as a one-way moving van because we found that we could then rent it by a certain number of days, and it made it economical, and we also didn't have to return it to the same place. I had to return the Lincoln. So we would start in New York and go all the way down to Nashville. We would return the van, the truck. Eric drove the truck, usually with Butch Norton, because at that point in time, Richard and I smoked cigarettes, and we were also smoking weed as often as we can. I would send the band home, and I would get into the Lincoln and drive 15, 16, 18 hours back to New York to return the Lincoln and fly home myself. This was our habit, and we did this for a long time. There's actually one of the people who's been on the broadcast was somebody that I met during that period, and I remember stopping to have dinner with on one of my drives back in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It was a grueling way of keeping it going. But we sort of had the feeling, without a record out, if we stop, we're going to lose this audience. And we worked too hard to build it up. It's too important to us. So we kept going. And something fortuitous happened. A couple of months after Tom Vickers from Mercury Records said, I can't sign you. You're too old. The label's going to want a longer revenue stream, the ability to work with you for 7 years. And this is 1992, man. You're 40 and 41 years old. We can't sign you. And then he got this idea, what if we were to sign you for very low money and focus exclusively on the adult market, not really necessarily put you out there, up against Duran Duran and the Proclaimers and all of that. Oh, we'll get into that in a second, John. I'm looking at the Hammerjacks quote. And I said, well, you really have no idea how prescient you are. The formats of radio that were playing us were in separate formats, but they're about to coalesce into their own format called AAA. And they already like us. And so instead of us being scattered, 10 stations in album rock, 10 stations in adult contemporary, 10 stations in non-commercial NPR, they're all going to be under the same tent. And so we got signed to Mercury and made Broken Moon, which came out middle of 1993. That one in the new AAA chart went top 15. And suddenly we really had some serious traction 3 years later, and a fan base out there. When we were talking to Tom about signing, he says, I want to see you live. I went, you really should do yourself a favor. Don't come to an LA show. Come see us at the Birchmere in Washington, D.C., and see what it's really all about. And he later said, man, it was like these guys were the Beatles or something, the way people were acting. And it gave him the notion that, you want to see us play. It's not as simple as just watching us perform. But see where the audience is reacting in what, with any luck, and with some work and focus and a promotion commitment, you can duplicate elsewhere. Although I do think that the audiences in these cities are particularly unique and have a love of music that isn't necessarily equally shared in all cities in the country. Pretty much if you can sell to those towns. And at this point, it was the big guns were Denver, really Boulder, Minneapolis, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. There were others. There was Asbury Park, New Jersey. There was Indianapolis, Indiana. There was Seattle. There was Phoenix. Stations in Texas never got into us. Stations in Florida, except for one, WMMO in Orlando, Florida. Jesse Scott played the living daylights out of us, but because of where Florida was, we couldn't string together a tour that wouldn't lose substantial amounts of money. So we never did it. We never played down there. I've since become very good friends with Jessie. I last saw her just about a year ago in Nashville, and maybe a little over a year ago. And she ended up running the Outlaw Country station on Sirius XM, and also working for Music Fog. If you go to YouTube and see the Music Fog videos of us, of me, really, because I don't think Lowen and Navarro ever played Music Fog. I did it a couple of times on my own, and a couple of times with David Glazer and Freebo, and those were put together by Jessie Scott, but who's a woman. Anyway, all this is to say that we just kept pounding away and pounding away and pounding away and hoping that we could actually get somewhere. And we did. Broken Moon did very well. It, too, sold close to 50,000 units, and we were really working our butts off. So that was that tour started out, that tour behind Broken Moon started out with it started out with a run with the Bodines, Actually, this was before that. We went out on our own. I think, I'm trying to remember where we went first. Probably the Midwest. Um, the second run on that one was Bodines, 17 days with the Bodines, starting in Chicago. Or actually, no, we saw starting in Chicago at the Aragon, which is a big giant ballroom. And a lot of great things happened on that day, not the least of which is we met a photographer named Paul Natkin, who is one of the most renowned rock photographers in the world. And he was hired to follow us around, to ride with us and just take pictures of us constantly. That's the same tour where we were taking pictures with Paul out in Wisconsin someplace, and we found a barn, and we're taking pictures by this barn, and Eric finds a stack of antlers, and he decides he'll pick up a set of them and wanted to stick them on the hood of the RV that we owned, so that it would look cool. Well, damned if we didn't have a smoky-hatted trooper chase us on foot as we're starting to roll away. Pull over, pull over, pull over. And we were pulled over for stealing the antlers and essentially for hunting without a license, which would have gotten us a poaching charge. And he said, we could impound your van. Go put the antlers back where you got them from. But we rolled around a lot, and the picture on the back, actually the pictures on the I've Had It All Plus 5 Live promotional CD. The front is at the Aragon, taken by Paul, and the back is, I think, at a radio station someplace, possibly WXRT, but those were taken by Paul Natkin. And the pictures of that whole time are just remarkable. But we were on it. We finished up 1993 and then went out on yet one more run. At this point in time, our band, when we were making Broken Moon, a decision had been made, mostly by our producer, to let the band go. He didn't feel comfortable with what was coming out of the band at that point in time. So he put together a different rhythm section. Both Tad and Butch were angry. I don't blame them. They were angry and disappointed. And, they'd just done 3 years on the road for very little money with the idea that they would get to make the record. And it didn't happen. They were on 2 tracks. They're on Broken Moon and I'll Set You Free. Those are the only 2 songs that Tad and Butch, where their work survived. We got together with Simeon Pilic and David Raven. Simeon had made Walking on a Wire. David we had wanted to work with, but we had instead worked with Tim Timmermans on that first album. Tim passed away last December, God rest his soul. And so when it came time to tour, we had to put a band together. Butch had been offended to the point of deciding, I'm done with you guys. I mean, we're still friends, and we remained friends, but it was a tense time. He goes, yeah, I don't want to do this. And Tad came back. We ended up getting Wally Ingram, who had been playing with Timbuk 3, to join us on drums. And in the middle of the Bodines run, we found out that they were getting hired in January of 1994 to go on the road with a young artist who no one had ever heard of, who had just put her first record out and was just trying to get somewhere. Her name is Sheryl Crow. So they left us and got with Sheryl Crow before she broke big. And they were with her when she broke big. So they went from playing tiny clubs driving around in a van to, they broke at Woodstock, at the Woodstock revival tour that happened on the 25th anniversary in 1994. And the rest with them is history. Wally ended up doing 12 years as a duo with David Lindley. Tad ended up playing with Sheryl for a while and then went from there to the Farm Dogs, which was Bernie Taupin's band. And they all did very, very, very well. Well, we took our brand new band and went out there, which was Dan Marfisi on drums and Glenn Holman on the bass, and started and kept it going. Did a pretty tough run in the Northeast at the very beginning of 1994. It was a 6-week sub-zero cold snap. such that although it's not in this book, it's somewhere. I think I've got yet another. Do I have yet another one? I think I do, unless it's in here, which was an article about how cold it all was. I mean, we're talking minus 20-degree weather for over a month. The final performance of that tour was in Portland, Maine, where it was only 20 degrees. And I went out in my underwear. Oh my God, I've got a program from Wolf Trapper Sean Colvin. I have a program from the Steppin' Out Festival in Blacksburg, Virginia from 1991. Good Lord, Cabaret Metro. I can't believe I have all this stuff. An open matchbook from the Smart Bar. Lona Navarro and Loie Nelson at the Metro sold out July 13th, 1991. I can't believe I actually kept all of this stuff. Actually, yes, I can. I've got, truth told, I have boxes of this stuff. Well, here we go. Zoo Fest 1991. I love this. July 10th, 1991, Zoo Fest with I'm going to stand up because it's impossible to know where it's going to be. Ian Matthews and Lona Navarro. Ian was a hero of mine. I had met him in England in 1980 when I was working for his management company, and that tour did not go well. And the next time we saw each other was 11 years later when we're opening for him. And it was definitely a yikers moment. We were all by ourselves in the dressing room, and I said, listen, you need to know that we've met before. And he goes, Management 3 in London in 1980. I went, oh, yeah, you remember. He goes, yeah, I do. He goes, water under the bridge, mate. And Ian and I are very close friends to this day. We've been trading notes lately, and he's been sending me some lyrics that I hope to have a moment to sort of have a go at. Oh my God, I've got a cereal box here. Kellogg's Mini Buns that offered up a free cassette single of TKA, who had cut my song. I've got a little piece of paper here, which is a receipt from a taxi in London, where I simply wrote down, please baby be on that train, to try to remember that title. I can't believe, this is all crazy that I have all this shit. And there's more. There was something that prompted me to go into here, but, and I'm just realizing this picture of the van is from when we were in Boston getting the van back after it blew up. Time it was, and what a time it was. It was time of innocence, a time of confidences. Long ago it may be, I have a photograph. Preserve your memories. They're all that's left you. This is a picture I took when we were doing a promotional gig at a place called The Hard Report, which was a music tip sheet for radio. That's where I met Mike Marone, who was the program director on The Loft at Sirius XM for 20 years. He put Lona Navarro on the air at The Loft several times, particularly in Loft sessions, where you would do an hour of, just bit after bit after bit. And we were the second ever act on the, what am I saying? The second ever act on the Loft Sessions. Here's a picture of, oh my God. Well, here you go. It wasn't September 16th. It was September 17th. And who are these people? This is from, oh my God, I love this. This is one of the original calendars that the Birchmere put out that they would put out. I think they still do. I have many of them framed. I'm going to have to frame this one, take it out of here and frame it. September 17th, Lowen and Navarro on a Monday night, it was preceded by 2 nights with Schooner Fair and followed by 2 nights of Jerry Jeff Walker. Then the standing Thursday gig of the Seldom Seen, who I never got to see. Chris Smither, Bill Morrissey in that month, Carlene Carter in that month. The very first show we ever did at the Birchmere. This is actually that's a little ad from Lowen and Navarro and Kinky Friedman at the Lone Star Roadhouse in New York City. I mean, I guess I had way more fun than I thought I did, which is a complete lie. I knew that I had a really good time. This was, I had a pretty wonderful time. There was at no point did I wonder why I was doing it. There were many times when I sat there and go, am I going to actually be able to do this? Well, I just figured out, all right, so that show where I said jazz, the ad is here from the Town Cinema in Avondale, Georgia. The night before was Brian and the Nightmares Tell Me a Story at a private party. Our night was Kathy Carlisle, Lowen and Navarro, and the Vidiots. You know, you pick up your gigs where you can. You do what you can. These pictures, there's an ad here from The Bitter End, which was our first show in New York. I'll get into that in a minute. We made a video for Walking on a Wire. Many of you have seen it. And this is a photo that was taken by, the woman who was doing wardrobe, who was my girlfriend, Linda Holler. And she took this, and it says hero because that's a hero shot, meaning that's the shot that shows, what you look like. And I think hero is meant to be from the waist up, so to speak. And I approved it. That's why it says okay. I will say there were several Polaroids, and I recall, actually, that Linda put one in my mom's casket when she passed away in 1994. Some of the things in here are on the silly side, including some of our first press, because everything before this page is songwriting stuff. Bangles, triplets. This is, oh my God. Charts. What is this? Is this Lowen and Navarro or 20 times? This is probably 20 times. Kevin McCormick 20 times and Nikita at the Club Lingerie. There's an old Polaroid of Eric and me celebrating having a big hit record with Benatar that Christmas. And this is actually volume 2. Volume 1 is around here someplace. And if I can find it glancing around, I'll pull it. I'm not going to waste a lot of time doing it, especially since we're down to the last 10 minutes, and we can't stick around too long. Well, that's a couple of years of some of the favorite venues. What we add to that are some of the radio stations, in particular 1998 or so, 1980 or 1999, we started playing for Steve Dahl on WCKG in Chicago. It started a very long love affair with him and his show that actually he was on the show. He and his wife were on the show just the other day. 1994, we started playing live on the air with Marty Bass in the morning. Marty Bass and Don Scott on WJZ Channel 13, the CBS affiliate in Baltimore. And actually, the morning of the California earthquake in 1994, I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Time, and heard about this while I was on my way to the, because it was earlier in LA when the earthquake hit in the middle of the night. And quite a few people were killed in that one. It was the worst. It was one of the worst earthquakes to ever hit California. New York had always been a little bit spotty, but we played the bitter end, the bottom line. Don Hills played a place called Wetlands. The last show Lowen and Navarro ever played was at a Jewish community center called the Maycor that had started doing a lot of acoustic acts. And then I didn't go back for years until probably about 8 years ago, in 2013, I want to say, 7 years ago, when I started playing the Living Room, which is a small place on the Lower East Side, and then developed my own little thing over at the Rockwood Music Hall, where I've played probably 8 or 9 times over the years, usually twice a year. It's been a tremendous run of interesting shows. The Southeast, very little. The Northeast, not too much. Texas, bupkis. We would occasionally play Texas. It never really went that well. Phoenix didn't go that great until we put our third album out and we started playing, and we got played on the Zone, which was a great radio station that we ended up playing the Arizona Festival. Ron Webster can speak to that, and Jenny. We played the Arizona Festival with ZON in big letters because it was KZON. And those were great bills with Bare Naked Ladies and Marshall Crenshaw and Jules Shear and the Bodines and Los Lobos. And we were included. And it was, I think, the week before one of those festivals that the station flipped to country. And that was the end of that. But during that period, we would sell out shows at a place called the Rocking Horse. And in particular with a group called Boxing Gandhis. That was led by a guy named Dave Darling. Now, I bring this up because Dave became a pretty busy producer. And the last 10 years or so, he's been noted for producing records by one Janova Magnus. So when Janova asked me to sing on her record in 2014, which is, Jesus God, 6 years ago now, I went to Dave's house to his studio. His wife, Bree Howard, was also around, and Bree had been the percussionist with a black eye patch in the Boxing Gandhis. It was a great band. Our friend Paul Bushnell played in the Boxing Gandhis, and Paul has played the last bunch of years with Faith Hill. You know, the interweaving of all of these particular, crowds of people, it carries on. There's a guy named Pete, is it Pete Frame? Pete Frame, look him up, is a guy who does these things called rock family trees, and he literally does draw them out by hand, and they basically look like genealogical charts of who played with whom and who replaced whom and where did they come from. I have a couple of hard copy, not hardcover, but books that they put out. I've had them for over 25 years. If you can ever find them, Rock Family Trees, there were at least 2 editions. I don't even know if there's a website, but if there is, it's really a fun view. One of these days, like when I'm done cleaning up my living room, I'm going to put together a Rock Family Trees book of the Lowen and Navarro, history. The people that played with us wound up playing with all kinds of people. Tim Timmermans put out several albums with a new agey smooth jazz band called Windows. Then later put out his own records on Higher Octave Record, including one he intentionally called Seven Bridges. Oh man, if it's in there, I got to get a copy of it. Thank you, Maria. I can't go a single episode without telling Maria Borges how much I love and appreciate her and her ingenuity and her proactivity. I mean, really, you are deeply in my heart and you're under my skin, and I'm grateful for you every single day. The rest of you, not so much. I'm kidding. But in our history, Tad Wadhams going to Sheryl Crow. Butch, when he left us, ended up going to Paula Cole and then spent 10 years. He was actually Jonathan with us. He became Butch after 10 years with the Eels. And then he went from there to Tracy Chapman, among other things. And then later, he's been now a dozen years with Lucinda Williams. Phil Parlapiano's played with everybody on the planet. John Prine, Tracy Chapman, Suicidal Tendencies, Joan Baez, Dave Koz. Phil is pretty amazing. Richard, after we sort of stopped, in 1996, we stopped carrying a full-time band. When we lost our deal with Mercury, we realized we couldn't really do what we had done before and keep touring as a band. We cut it back and went out playing as a duo for the first time since we had started. We hadn't been a straight duo since 1989, and by this time it's 1996. For 7 years we worked with a band, and then all of a sudden we were on our own again. So we frankly made more money because we weren't spending it on players and airfares and hotels, no offense to them intended. 3 years later, we decided, you know what, we can play with local players. That's going to save our asses. And so we would play with bands, but that's when we started picking up people like Brett Simons, Dan Massey, Nick Kitsos, Rafe Bradford, Gerald Dowd, Larry Beers, and the people that had played with us. That was just Chicago. We would Robbie Magruder, rest his soul, and J.T. Brown in the Washington, D.C. area. Oh, good God, Jimmy Anton and Noah Levy in Minneapolis. Jimmy gave way to Brian Rossler, who I play with now. I play with Noah very occasionally, not very often, but I see him, and started playing with Dan Schwartz. That was in my era. That wasn't a Lowen thing. But no, I mean, you know, picking up players in local towns, skilled players, we would send them the charts and say, we're not going to rehearse. You better learn the songs, or not. I mean, if you don't learn the songs, you better bring your game. And this is how we got through it all. The period from then was definitely different. We went out on a tour in '98 that was in some ways the death knell. It was the last tour where we took a band. We had Robbie Harrington, who we had picked up in 1995 and continued to work with through 1998. Literally, in playing with him in 1998, we dropped him off in Nashville because he moved there. He went on to become one of the biggest bass players in Nashville, working with David Mead, working with Keith Urban, working with Dierks Bentley, Brooks and Dunn. He's an active, busy bass player in town. And, you know, it was a pretty amazing thing to have these guys playing with us and where they would end up. Dan Marfisi, when he left us, ended up working with Poe, who was a gold artist. Basically, one of the coolest things you could do for your career is get fired by Lowen and Navarro. You know what I mean? So, yikes. That's all I got to say is yikes. There are many more stories. I'm not sure what we're going to do next Saturday, but I appreciate your letting me trip down memory lane. I think one of the things that we can do is I'll look for that other scrapbook. And at some point, maybe it would be fun if I put together some video and we did a watch party on a Saturday. Tomorrow, at 11 a.m. California time, starts Skinner and Twitch's stream from the UK. I'll be on around noonish California time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. Later that evening, I want to say 7 p.m. Eastern Central time, Rebecca Loby is doing a webcast, I want to say on Zoom, but I might be wrong, where she's honoring healthcare workers. And I'm going to be coming on and probably just doing one song, doing the version of We Belong to Hope that Rebecca Sanford and I rewrote of our version of We Belong. And that's all happening on Sunday. That's all happening tomorrow. Today, I'm going to be figuring out how to do, a week from Sunday, I'm going to be doing Twitch with Marina V, who put out the version of We Belong that won some awards last year. And that's going to be pretty wild. We're going to be trading back and forth, and actually starting in about 45 minutes, I'm going to be figuring out how to use Jam Kazam to see if we can actually play together from remote locations. That's going to be its own brand of OMG as we figure out how the hell do I make this work. Beyond that, we're carrying on with viewer sets, with fan sets. As I said, I've got actually, I just realized I have 1 or 2 emails to send out to people saying, yep, you're in. But it is full. If you haven't gotten a set in, we'll figure out another time in another way. But and then I'm going to probably start going to 3 days a week. I have to admit that after 115, 114 episodes, I'm starting to get a little bit toasty around the edges. And something tells me I'm going to have a whole lot more energy if well, I mean, look, I'm not slowing it down. What is today, the 25th? I'm not slowing it down for another 20 days, almost 3 weeks. So there. In fact, I think it's 3 full weeks. So 3 weeks from now, we'll slow it down a little bit and see how it goes. Right now, I think the verdict is Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. And we'll talk about whether the Monday, Wednesday are daytimes, evenings like we've been doing, or maybe slightly earlier. But the Saturday will definitely be daytimes. Above all, thank you for your time. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for your tolerance of a trip down memory lane. Isn't it true that someone else's vacation pictures are the most boring things in the world? So thanks for hanging. Thanks for visiting. And, you know, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to forget. Watching as the hearts go by, watching them as they fly, way up into the sky, a bunch of hearts between you and I, we're all together now, watching as the hearts go by. We're carrying on for 3 weeks, I know that we just might peak, it's a schedule we're gonna tweak. Maybe I'll have time to go play hide and seek, who knows? Watching as the hearts go by. On Saturdays we'll tell stories. I hope to God that they're not boring. When you don't have something to rhyme, just lay the hell out and don't make a big mistake or a train wreck. Watching as the hearts go by. Watching as the hearts go by, watching as the hearts go by, way up into the sky. Hey, thanks to you for mine, we're all together now, watching as the hearts go by, watching as the hearts go by, and we're watching as the hearts go by. We'll see you all Monday, 5 p.m. Jenny Hilliker's set. 5 p.m. California time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And in Washington, D.C., it's 1956. Big love, you guys. Have a good rest of the weekend.